Greetings, this is Angelus de Mortiel with another multiplayer build guide in Dragon Age Inquisition. Today we will be looking at the final of the original roster of characters in multiplayer, the Katari. We will be building the Katari as a control striker. As you know, the control class is designed to control enemy movements either through inhibiting or debilitating them, whereas a striker is designed for mobility and single target burst DPS. The Katari took me a long time to actually put together, not because he's bad, not even close. It was almost because he had too many skills that were too hard to choose from. But finally, I've put together a build that I believe I can comfortably say is my favorite. Let's get to the build. First up in the onslaught tree is Charging Bull. Charging Bull is an attack that sees the Katari charge straight at the enemy, dealing 200% weapon damage, generating 10% guard per enemy hit, and knocking any enemies that come in his way down to the ground. Now, Charging Bull costs 5 stamina per second, which means it does not have a fixed duration. You can keep charging as long as you have stamina left. Furthermore, it has a really low 8-second cooldown, meaning it can be used quite frequently. Its upgrade, Gore and Trample, makes the next ability after you use Charging Bull cost no stamina. Now that does have a 6-second duration on that effect, however. Charging Bull is an effective way to close the gap on enemies and knock them to the ground and keep them from doing anything. However, it is important to note that Charging Bull does not give you any bonus to defense, so you are still vulnerable to ranged attacks even while you're charging. Next, we have Mighty Blow. Mighty Blow is a strong downward strike that hits a small AoE in front of the Katari, dealing 200% weapon damage and knocking down any light enemies that are in the vicinity. If the enemy is already knocked down, it does double that damage to them. It costs 50 stamina and has a 16-second cooldown and is a warrior impact detonator. The upgrade, Easy Target, reduces the cost down to 35 stamina and changes that bonus damage to 300% instead of 200, meaning that if an enemy is knocked down, you will do 3 times Mighty Blow's original damage. Now, Mighty Blow is hands down one of the easiest skills to use. It has a nice forgiving area of effect, and most importantly, it knocks down a lot of enemies, making them vulnerable to further attacks. It also synergizes brilliantly with Charging Bull, as Charging Bull will frequently knock down enemies in his path, leaving them open to the bonus damage from Mighty Blow. Up next, we have Grapple Chain. Grapple Chain is an ability where the Katari throws out a grappling hook at an enemy, and if it's a light enemy that's hit, he pulls that enemy towards him, bringing them into melee range. Initially, this does not do any damage, and more serves as just a method by which to attract enemies in close so you can bludgeon them to death. Now, it does have about a 15 to 20 meter range, so it can't pull enemies from just anywhere. It does have a fairly low stamina cost at 20 and a moderately low 12-second cooldown. With the upgrade, Give Them the Boot, this sees the Katari kick the enemy in the face after jerking them towards him, dealing about 200% weapon damage. However, where the description says it stuns the enemy, it actually knocks them down instead, which is not a bad thing because it synergizes quite well with Mighty Blow. Finally, we have Combat Roll. Combat Roll is the basic warrior evasion ability that allows you to dodge in any direction. It does have a low but present 20 stamina cost and a very low 2-second cooldown that is only barely longer than the animation of the combat roll itself. The upgrade, Roll With It, purges any movement inhibiting effects such as fear, paralyzed, knockdown, stun, and so on. I cannot stress enough how important this ability still is for the Katari even after his buff. Since you do not have a shield or any way to defend against ranged attacks reliably, combat roll is what you need to use to close in and escape from enemies quickly. Now, let's talk passives. I will note that the passives I selected for this build specifically play into the synergy of the skills I use and how I play. First, I chose Relentless. This grants a +4 to Cunning, a +3 to Strength, and a +2 to Constitution. Most important there is the Cunning for the next passive, Flow of Battle. This reduces all of your cooldowns for your abilities by 1 second per critical hit. Coup de Grace increases the damage to knock down or stun targets by 30%. Yes, knock down as in what Mighty Blow, Charging Bull, and Grappling Hook all do. Opportunist doubles your critical hit chance when attacking the enemy's flank. Not only does that synergize well with Flow of Battle, but it also is ideal to be attacking the enemy's flank when using a class like the Katari. Fervor increases your damage by 30% for 5 seconds when an enemy dies within 10 meters of you, and enemies die within 10 meters of you a lot. Scenting Blood increases your movement speed by 50% and critical chance by 10% when an enemy within 10 meters of you has less than 35% health. See Fervor that I just mentioned for why this always seems to be happening to the Katari. Bear Mauls the Wolves reduces incoming stagger from frontal attacks and eliminates any incoming flanking damage. This adds much needed survivability to the Katari since you can sometimes find yourself exposed. Deep Reserves increases the stamina regeneration rate by 50% when you have less than 50% stamina. Simple enough. The strategy for the Katari before his buff used to play out like a bar fight. Fantasize about the pain you are about to bring down on your enemy, only to end up falling on your face. The only way you could succeed is with very careful and often tedious stratagem that is very reminiscent of games like Dark Souls. And like Dark Souls, a single mistake with the Katari on Perilous was devastating, leaving you to question just how much of a masochist you actually were. Now that the Katari was buffed, routine and threatening are like one giant china shop. Perilous still does require you to play the strategic route, as with most classes, but it's worlds more forgiving if you make a mistake. Now let's cover some quick notes. First, 3 of the Katari's skills in this build will, in some form or another, reduce the distance between the Katari and enemies. It is a unique strength of this build over other melee builds I've done, making it easier to deal with enemies at a distance. Second, I tried to make my builds as least reliant on gear as possible, but gear that is noteworthy to benefit the Katari are health belts, stamina amulets, cooldown amulets, as well as gear that adds cunning, critical chance, and heal on kill. Now, how does it play out? Well, there are 2 ways I primarily play the Katari, with a tank and without a tank. With a tank is very simple. Stay glued to the tank's shadow until they initiate and pull aggro, then quickly Charging Bull through the enemy group while they are still taunted. If done correctly, you should knock down a good portion of the enemy group, not draw their attention, and end up flanking them. From there, use Mighty Blow on any knockdown enemies left alive in that main group. Basic attack any enemies that are left from that, then survey the remaining enemy locations. Locate any damager classes, such as archers, shadows, horrors, and etc., and grapple chain the nearest one and kill it. Charging Bull into the next enemy. Finish enemies knocked down with Charging Bull or Grapple Chain with Mighty Blow as needed. If Charging Bolt and Grapple Chain are both on cooldown, use Combat Roll to quickly close the gap on enemies. Repeat until the enemies are cleaned up. If you do not have a tank, things become more delicate. It is very likely that you will be drawing the most attention of your party between being able to do damage very quickly and possessing the biggest threat passive that you unfortunately have. This is not a big deal unless you are on Perilous, where you have to play very carefully. The rule of the game becomes using Combat Roll ad nauseum in the same attack pattern. The way I break it up, Combat Roll after every ability and after 2 basic attacks. Also, you will want to use the animation canceling technique I outlined in my Reaver build guide. I'll link that in the description. Why? Because the Katari generates guard on hit, but on Perilous it only takes 1 or 2 hits from an enemy to wipe that out, meaning that you'll have to generate guard quickly while staying on the move. Without animation canceling, you will often take a hit in the process of 2 basic attacks. Utilizing this build will definitely make you feel like a bulldozer, plowing through enemies consistently enough that you will wonder how the Katari doesn't trip over all the bodies he's putting on the ground. For all avid fans of Dark Souls-like games, this build on Perilous difficulty will give you all of the rage quit-inducing combat moments you love, but without losing all of your souls when you die. For those not avid fans of Dark Souls, this is the bruiser that gives you the no-frills bludgeon fest that many classic fans of DPS warriors enjoy. No mysterious dragon blood-fueled rage, no spirit-powered augmenting, no lyrium-infused anti-demon magic. This is a pure warrior. As I always say, this is not the best build for the Katari. There is no such thing as a best build. Have another way to build the Katari? Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed the video or just have something to say, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Once again, this is Angelus de Mortiel, signing off.